For a long time, I would say, I'm waiting for the world to call me an artist. I'll call myself a painter, I'll call myself a printmaker, but I don't dare call myself an artist. So I gave myself a gift about 10 minutes ago and decided that I will, in fact, call myself an artist because it's so central to the way in which I live. Because I think one of the things that happens that allows me to consider myself being an artist is the amount of craftsmanship that I have learned and employ, and the number of craft techniques that I discard. Perhaps it sounds a little bit too glib and clever. Not really clever, but trying to sound clever. The difference between working only out of craft, every piece of art is a battle. Craft is a battle that's been won. And for me, every work that I've done is an example of a battle lost. It's all the things that I wanted it to be, all the things I selected not to put in there, all the things that I've done, and I've taken as far as I could possibly do to make it a cogent statement, a meaningful statement, something that feels as inevitable as it can be, and yet never as perfect as I would have wanted it to be. So I have to go on and do another one. Because along with that, almost like every finished piece is a battle scar. The war to do something meaningful to me, meaningful to anybody looking at it, meaningful for whatever, meaningful today, tomorrow, forever. I can't delude myself very long to feel that any of that has really happened or would continue to happen. So, I climb back into the studio, try to keep a balance between thinking and feeling, planning, and letting things, having the courage to keep trying to make changes, even though the thought may still feel fresh, to examine it, to re-examine it. And since I'm not starting with a preconceived idea of what the finish is supposed to be, I can't have the idea that it's a battle won. And I try very hard to avoid that last part of a painting, of saying, this is, now I know what it's supposed to be, and I will go ahead and finish it. Instead of that, I will carry it as far as I think I can and be shocked to feel there was nothing more that I can do. That this really, how did that happen? Oh, there's nothing else for me to do with this. Oh, the world should see this. This is really, really, really good. Wow, this is, oh well. So maybe in the morning there'll be something more to do. Well, maybe not. And then starting another one very often means reaching for something in contrast. Starting another one could be, okay, maybe it should be as highly defined and heavily colored as the last one, and see where that would lead me. Or perhaps I've done one that will be very different in size and scale, in feeling, from the one I did before. And so there is a progression, but it's not a logical progression in terms of what the art would look like. It's a logical progression for me, indulging in that marvelous luxury of having the time and the place and hopefully the means to keep letting each work be its own challenge and build in contrast to or building upon the last thing that I've done. It's an emotional decision. It's in terms of the artwork. It's saying that I've been avoiding the figure for too long. Better get in and maybe let some of this become figurative. And although it may not, and I want to keep that open, so I generally start off without a figurative image in mind and begin working to create the option that comes if I know that I'm going to be working for strong color contrast. I may start on a fresh canvas and put down areas of very bright color and keep them as pure as possible, so that knowing the quality of the paint is such that if I have a dull color, it may be much harder to cover it with a really bright color. So if I feel that I want to work toward a bright color, I will keep the colors bright. That doesn't mean that it won't all be painted over black and scratch lines will come into it later, but it moves me in the direction where there's been some form of intellectual choice making. This either fits with what I've been doing, challenges what I've been doing, grows out of the last one, or grows in opposition to what I've been doing before. So that I like the sense of being able to look back and say, this is not dissimilar. I may have started off with the idea of doing something totally fresh, knowing that's just bull. I mean, it just does not. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for me in my work. It doesn't exist for me in terms of the artwork of the world. There's nothing that's more damning than the idea that I'm going to do something that nobody ever did before. But there's something so delightful to know that what I do, nobody has done that exact, precise, totally that I did. Each one is unique. They're never uncharted. I mean, there's always so much visual history, as I say, from my own work and other people's work, so that the surprises and the things is to try to keep things fresh. And the only way to do that is to be as honest with myself as I can be. And this feels like a very, very nutty time from what I refuse to recognize as being the end of my roads, because I say that because I'm supposed to. I don't say that because I believe it. I still think that there's enough history and mystery to want me to do more than I've already done. A painting was not only a substitute for a photograph, that a painting had its own particular kind of energy. And of course, who did I look to with had this? Because it was gutsy, it was nervy, it was ballsy. Picasso, more than any other. And in its own time, actually, he was such an overwhelming influence that you almost had to say, well, I'm going to paint like Picasso because what the hell else can I do? Or, no, I'm not going to paint like Picasso. I'm not going to paint like Picasso. I don't paint like Picasso. What can I do? So they were not the only influences. And there was the formalism of Cézanne that was very much respected. Then there was Monet and the seeing things by different light and how that would affect things. So the Impressionist, post-Impressionist period had really solidified for me, and was pretty much solidified in terms of the art world and the world at large. So they had broken down their barriers. Then World War II came along. It made us a lot more cosmopolitan on a bigger scale. As a New Yorker, I guess the cosmopolitan influence was there. It wasn't as remote. But for the people who came back, GI Bill, went to the universities, and certainly it was convoluted in my thinking pattern, because it was to get out of being an insurance broker, a life insurance broker, that I decided to go back into the GI Bill, and newly married, and my wife and I went out to Wyoming because it accepted most of the credits and it gave a place for married vets to live on campus. And those were pretty prime reasons, or if reasons they be. And of course, I didn't take any education courses. I started getting totally wrapped up in the affirmations that I was getting from the profs in the art department. The University of Wyoming wound up attracting an amazing cross-section. We had a surrealist, mostly European, trained as well, although he was from Philadelphia, Leon Kelly, and we had George McNeil, who was becoming a recognized abstract expressionist, and he had worked with Hans Hofmann along with Jackson Pollock. It was a well-trained staff, but it was also a not conventional, so-called realistic rendering emphasis. People born, say, in the 30s, just as an example. Prior to that, even the artist as well as the public felt that the way you would measure the skill of an artist is how well they would be able to make a pencil drawing that looked like a photograph. It is only now that we no longer ask that as automatically if we see somebody doing a totally non-figurative piece. We may, on occasion, but much more rarely, try to say, well, how do I know it's any good if I don't know that they could do an absolute rendering portrait? That may still linger. I just don't think it has the automatic sign of training, because the training may not even take them there. Coming in a little bit later than many of the other students and a little bit older, I was a lot freer in enjoying the brushstroke and the marks and letting the painterliness dominate over the image. And so I got a lot of affirmation from the staff. And I still think it's very funny that I got all these descriptions about how Jackson Pollock worked. I had never seen a Jackson Pollock painting, but I had heard so much about the way he had worked, and was very stimulated by the exposure to abstract expressionism and the freedom to see to allowing the hand, the mind, and the eye of the artist to be visible instead of disguised. Yeah, when I got back to New York, and the Pollock was beginning to be a name. It was not just only from George McNeil. It was beginning to be a name in the newspapers, and I think it was, I'm not sure the exact date, but something like 51 or 52, somewhere in there, that Life magazine proclaimed Jackson Pollock as the best American painter. So things had moved that quickly within an 8 or 10 year period. Abstract expressionism went from, what the hell are those crazy guys doing? They can't even paint, to this American art, this New York school, and then American school is the dominant way of working. And then I fell in love with all the other abstract expressionists. I began to think that wow, this is really the way to go. But de Kooning, oh, the god, and he started letting the figure come into his painting, and did it beautifully. And I felt a very strong kinship, still do, to that kind of work. So my link to the figurative had never been broken. A painting has to be true to what it is. A painting is paint applied to a two-dimensional surface. And trying to hide that is hiding a truth. And so that pushed me to where I understood a little bit about respecting things I never thought about before. How important scale was, the willingness to work within a rectangle. What do I do about space? Instead of taking me away from the formal elements, it kicked me right into them. What does a line do? Does a horizontal line create space? Is that what I want? Is that honest? And the feeling all along is I have to be very careful about any illusion of three-dimensional space, because it wasn't true. To be honest, it has to look like a man-made thing. And it also has to have a respect for the paint and for the surface that was going to be painted on, and the restrictions of size that are imposed by the rectangle. Getting something that will meet the academic or the design criteria and still be expressive. I think that, of anything, has been the strongest thread, most defining qualities that I reach for in all my work. Where is the mass? How much symmetry is involved? Part of what I do is balance and balance is a good word for me, removing a lot of extraneous things are always the hardest part, so that the structuring by color, by area, by the black and white balance, by the symmetry, these are paramount. The intellectual element, the identification element, the association, that depends on the viewer. It's what the viewer brings, and I have to limit how much I want to control that. That's the viewer's responsibility. I've done my job. I've created something that I can respect in terms of how cohesive it is, how well it's been executed. Did I respect the craftsmanship that the material demand? And did I take something to the point where it still felt concluded and fresh at the same time? And it's a point where you can, as a viewer, take over. I appreciate, I admire, I welcome, but I really do not work hoping to give the viewer a story. my wife's desire to come back east to family, and felt that my academic record at that point, considering that it was pretty stellar in Wyoming, made up for deficiencies when I had gone to the College of the City of New York and the grades there. So I was convinced to apply to major schools for an advanced degree. And because New York was the base and it seemed to be the fastest way to get an advanced degree and to get into teaching, I went to Columbia. And so it was by default, certainly, that Columbia was the choice. It was not as if I had directed my undergraduate work with the idea of going there for graduate work. And it was nice because I began to meet artists who were on the faculty and artists who were in the community. And I guess I saw that somehow I had to try to figure out a way to make a career out of being a painter, but at least, if not a career, at least an identity. That I couldn't just be a student forever, although that seemed like a very nice idea. So by the time I got my master's, I had also had a Lisa. And so the offer of the job through the department was a job in New Jersey. And I was able to move there, and it was teaching arts and crafts to a 6-year junior high school program. And it probably, because I didn't know what else to do, I stayed a second year, which proved to have been very wise, because it meant that they didn't can me, but it was at my option that I left. And so it was a matter of employment that I wound up doing drafting work. And we were working my way up in this from one of many in the drafting pool to where I became the assistant to a head designer at Designs for Business in New York, working on major skyscraper development projects. And it was still not enough of an identity for me to stay away from art or to use some of the identity in art. So when I used the social connections that I had made with other art people, that when they offered me the job of teaching painting at Nassau Community College, the design field is one in which is very project-oriented. And I bounced around a little bit, and the idea of getting proper employment during a slump period, which was true in the early 70s. So I made application for some teaching jobs at the advice of the people at Nassau Community College. And so I wound up teaching full-time in Port Washington in a very good school system with some very good people, and started getting active as a painter in the Teachers Union projects. 1970, before I went back into full-time teaching, I had had my first one-person show on Long Island with a pretty spectacular review. All of that helped get me the job, so I came in with that kind of credential. And then when they have juried shows for Long Island art teachers, I pretty invariably got a prize or at least an honorable mention. Yeah, I don't know where the energy came from, but I was doing things. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because I'd have to commute at 6 and get a couple hours in while the kids in the household would finally sleep. So yes, I did. I never stopped painting because I kept feeling that I had to reinforce my identity as a painter. That was on the outside. On the inside, I felt that I was always doing catch up to those people who've been able to be involved in the art field without interruption, without having to teach. It was with very little reluctance, however, that when I was able to retire at 62, that my second wife and I talked about the idea of taking the earliest possible retirement and to spend my time full-time as a painter. And that also resulted in the move a couple of years later to Maine. I love the chair series because I can be very, very free. And as long as there was some sense of vertical support and a horizontal resting place and leg supports, would say it's a chair, whether I made rounded arms or non-arms, whether I showed 4 legs or 2 legs or all of these things. The chair could be the most surreal because it's the most concrete, although I play against that and say it's a painting, it's not a chair. Nobody can construct a chair like these lines in a painting construct a chair. So it's a thing that still anchors into the reality, a symbolic reality. It's still a chair. It's still something that we can understand. It's a chair, and it's a chair in a room. It's a chair in a landscape, but it's a chair. It's a thing that's observable. More people involved in the arts, surprisingly enough, were upset by the chair than I had ever imagined. They saw a universal statement in these abstracted chairs, like, oh, they feel so terribly lonely. Starting to control space a little differently than I had been. The chair, the still life, they have that same world of space operating for them. The landscape I find much trickier. I react to it. I'm aware of it, but it doesn't engage my mind. The chair engaged my mind. The puppet series engaged my mind. And from the puppet series, the idea of relating the maker to the object became a very direct one. The hand puppet being, talking to my hand, talking to myself. So talking to myself is another way of isolating the head. So very often the puppet in the hand puppet became the more representational of the two. So if I have removed the head from the body, what do I do with it? What am I going to do with this now? So it's not like taking a chair and making a chair that couldn't possibly be built, but no one would have any difficulty, I hope, in recognizing that this is a painting in which the subject is a chair. The flip side is to make a situation that has nothing to do with reality. At first, it came out of puppets. I can find other strings, but however I got there, what I began to have some fun for, first of all, it's the triangulation and the pyramid shape, which goes back to the Renaissance, and all the rest is a way of composing a painting that has a combination of reality and hierarchy, but also a religious formation, so that that kind of pinnacle for the Godhead, the Saint head, the Christ head, rides to that position. I've never tried to use them as if this was illustrating the man's inhumanity to man. They are cerebral for me, very, very much so. It's I live in my head. I assume that other people will identify the idea that we live in our brain, in our heads, and the sense of isolation takes it into the surreal thing, a real head in an absolutely isolated, strange environment for that. And also, pinnacle implies the highest achievement that we have made. All happens very often, both individually and collectively, from that. So now we put it on a pedestal. And a high pedestal is a pinnacle. And that's where the head belongs. The rest of the body really is just supporting the head. I mean, there are a lot of nice times when the body gets supported for a lot of other ways and means and things like that. And I delight to know that that happens and has happened. But the creative, the imaginative, the giving, the sympathetic, the intelligent, the recording, that's all in the head. We're so used to thinking dreamlike with surrealism, and Dali and Dali-esque things have made us do that. I don't know that anybody dreams that way. I think it's a convention. I think that we have. I think most of what we live and do is very mundane. So the Dali-esque dream is one of the things we have learned. One of the things art has taught us. It's a way of seeing things that we don't see. probably in the 90s. I began to combine things that I had done it before, but combine things like a figure with in a still life, matching that up. I began also to do things like cover what I was doing with a layer of black and scratching through that, and so that it could look very, very, very fresh. Also trusting intuitive things. I think I allowed the passion to move a little bit more away from the wrist and more into the head. Well, certainly in the kimono paintings, I allowed some of those to become very ethereal, so that practically floated off the canvas. And so in many ways they are far more back to abstract expressionist roots than anything else that I had done. And so there was a large concentration on that, because the overall format, that was set. It was going to be some form of T, be it slanting in space or bigger thing. And the psychological aspect of it was much more so. With the chairs, people brought it and said, oh, that's a very lonely chair, or why one big chair, a little one, that must be the master. You know, they had to bring that to it. With the kimono, I was doing it. I was making a statement that had so much more to do with texture. I wasn't trying to introduce things other than things which are visually exciting for themselves. There's no psychological linkage to the observable world in the kimono. It is what it is. So the chair is something we sit in, and the kimono is something we wear. They relate to human activities. The puppet series relates to the creativity. It's something that we make. And the Pinnacle series is the intellectual. It's respect for the intellectual man, the emotional man. You can't be an American without feeling success is measured in dollars. How do we function without it? First, in recognizing that it's not, I will not be rewarded in a standard fashion as an artist. Nobody, statistically, nobody is going to say to me, I like your work. What do you need to live on? I will give you that in return for artwork of a certain specified, for as long as you shall live. Was it done that way before historically? Often. Patronage was taken for granted, but it's not the way it's done here. So it has become an activity of leisure activity for most people. And I put myself in that same category. And with the getting a lot of, oh, come on now. who's had the kind of shows you've had, the galleries that have shown your work, the people who've bought your work. How can you say that? Because by American standards, if I can't support myself, and I can't, and I do not have a lavish lifestyle. I would love to have a lavish life. I do not have a lavish life. I love the life I have anyway. I guess you define success by its goal. And if my goal is to survive and continue to make artwork, which I think on a good day, a lot of good days, is respectable. I've been successful in putting out a respectable or better product. In terms of my life, I've been very successful in because I've been a parent, a husband, a homeowner, a functioning member of and caring citizen. And while doing all of these things, I've continued to make art which is of satisfaction to me and sufficiently so to other people in the field to give me affirmation and to continue. And I'm programmed. I get up somewhere between 6 and 8 in the morning. It used to be closer to 6. Now I'm told that I should try to get more sleep, so it's closer to 8 before I'm up. By the time I take care of my morning chores with myself, take my medicine, have my coffee, it's 9:30. I'm in the studio. It's about 12 o'clock. Isn't it time for lunch? Oh, 12 o'clock, lunchtime. So 1 o'clock, somewhere in there. I may stretch it to 2. I'll have lunch. 6:30, it's time to quit working for the day. The day ends magically at that thing, so I clean up a little bit as much as I'm going to. And ready to think dinner and relaxing for the evening so that I can go to bed, get up in the morning, and do it again. My routines are very much set for me. Along with that, the pattern is a working man's pattern. So am I a working artist? I'm an artist. I just told you now 15 minutes ago. Yes, I'm not just a painter, printmaker. I'm an artist. And not only am I an artist, but I can prove it. Because what do I do during the day? I have my breakfast, then I'm in the studio. I have my lunch, then I'm in the studio. Then I have my dinner, and what am I going to do the next day? Just what I did today. What does that do? I'm a working artist. I follow the pattern of workmanship. I can't get into how much of my waking time that I now spend in sitting and just staring at a canvas, trying to decide what to do next, was not with me when I was doing other things as well. So when I did get up at 4 a.m, I had been already thinking about what I would be doing. Now I have the dreaded luxury of sitting there, not at all sure of what I'm going to do or why I'm going to do it. And I think that it probably was a good energy demand when the time was more limited. Whether I would take more chances or fewer chances, or whether that has something to do with age or not, I don't know. But I would say the most energetic application of paint probably came when I first quit teaching and was painting full time. The need to justify who we are, it has a cultural component. And I think that by our myth, we want to feel that it is a compulsion rather than a way of living, that it is somehow an uncontrollable drive that makes somebody a painter or a writer or someone be an artist. The idea of putting the label of artist on somebody is like say, I know what I'm going to be today. Today I'm going to be a genius. So there's a little bit, today I'm going to be an artist. Hell no. What I'm going to do today is get back there and fight my fight in front of a canvas and let some of that fight show in the work itself. And I don't think there's anything natural about wanting to be a painter. There seems to be something a little bit natural about wanting to leave marks or leave an indication that there something natural about wanting to enhance and personalize the work. And in art, we are creating a whole new world every time. So to try to find a balance between what we already know how to do and to try to find something which suits this particular unique, special, one-of-a-kind problem. And see that and working at it is the difference. That part of what you're doing is the artwork.